Okay, so now we're ready to bring in our assets from Mixamo export into Unity, but just one little preparation we have to do first. Just organizing the Unity workspace. This is like the section where we're ready to import the Kenny model, I guess if you will. Just setting it up for that. That's where we're at with this project here. Preliminaries, this is the folder that has the Mixamo exports. We have the model with the T-pose, idle FBX, and we have the three animations. There's actually more information in there you'll see once we get into Unity. You have to do an important step. You have to add a new folder here. It has to call it materials. I think Unity is actually looking for the name or wording materials with an S. Don't do materials with a Z, or don't do any sort of, just to be on the safe side. But Unity does a great job of looking for, and materials, it tries to pull in actually from a folder. When you extract materials manually into Unity, it wants it extracted from a folder. So just taking our original checkerboard, it does, and it matches more or less the structure that we have with our in-course materials. Just pointing out here that there's things that we see in the model, like a avatar and a root bone, and we see the animations, of course. Ours will be a little bit different, but all those elements will be in there too, and that's really what matters. So just putting in the whole folder. Now the whole folder contains, everything, all those elements I just had. Materials folder with the texture inside. Now look what it's smartly done. It's already made the material. It's taken the materials from Mixamo. There's my checkerboard texture that I put in the materials folder. This is the idle FBX part model. Okay, now these are the animations and these are JSONs, but inside, attached to each JSON, is the actual animation clip without the skin that we made from Mixamo. They're there. It's the triangles with the lines to show that those are animations. Okay, there they are, the three of them. Those are there, matching like what we see with the other character, where you see the three triangle animations. And as long as that information is there, Mixamo has obviously given it some extra. JSON is a sort of JavaScript. We don't have that here, but it doesn't matter. Mixamo does its thing. Just trying to compare the folders. This is an avatar that we have for the Kenny. I made my Kenny blue. I was playing around with it, so it's not dark like the other one was. But here's our original model, and you have a good material because the checkerboard is applied to a sort of sphere mapping. That shows you that you really have a material. So you bring in, your model, and same idea. You bring it in. And actually, when I brought my model in, it was bigger, so I had to do the scaling thing like we did. I just think I was fiddling around with that too much and trying to show, so I just skipped ahead. But you'll have to sometimes do that part. Just showing that we have to bind to a humanoid type avatar, because the nav mesh agent that drives our enemy controller is a humanoid type controller. So our avatar, we want to create an avatar from our character that we drag in, and I'm just showing here how you set it to humanoid and then you create it from the model. And the most important thing, you always have to hit apply, otherwise it won't do it. And look at the bottom, we now have that little icon that represents an avatar. So we have an avatar icon. That's a good start. Just going back into the Kenny folder. Kenny has an avatar too. We have an avatar. And looks like it's given us like a root bone in there as well. So our character's looking good so far. Of course, we need to do the animator controller, because whenever you have an avatar, it's looking for an animator controller. So you have to do the old create animator controller game object. Okay, I just leave it right there on the same folder structure, so everything's kind of together. As you know from the course, it's somewhere else, but it doesn't really matter where it's located as long as you know where it is, because you have to drag it in and attach it to the parameter for the avatar. Okay, so we have an animator controller, and I'll get to that animator controller window in a minute, but then we select our avatar, parented to our model placeholder. Okay, I'm just looking to see that things are sort of arranged, or emphasizing you click on it in the hierarchy to get the right sort of setup in your inspector, where it needs to pull now that controller. See, the animator controller is now pulled from that sort of avatar. So now you take your controller, drag it over, the avatar is right. That's the avatar we created, and now the animator controller's in there. Sometimes you want to look at the animator controller, you learn a lot. Notice that there's no green around the hands. That's actually maybe easier for later on when we want to add a gun. It's going to be a bonus section separate, but right now the goal here is to arrive at a sort of, and you always have to click done to get out of the configurator for the avatar. It's the only way you get back to your screen. Okay, so if you're ever stuck, make sure you scroll to the bottom and hit done, just saving everything we have. Okay, a few more steps and we're all caught up to what we have with the so-called Kenny um, asset that we used. Just scrolling over to get my animator controller Windows workspace kind of, you zoom in. It's like the nodes in Blender. You hold down the mouse button there, middle mouse, holding down to move it around, and you zoom in with the scroll wheel to kind of zoom in. I'm just moving the things in closer together so we can kind of see it and work. And animator controller, you have an entry state, exit state, and an any state. Default setting for an animator controller. Now, just looking at it a little more closely, and we're going to start to drag in our animations just like we know how to do. So just want to make the workspace a little easier to see. And so yeah, then you navigate back down to your, just saving here. I think that's all I'm doing is just kind of, I'm looking at the different windows of the animator controller. You have parameters and base layer. Now is the important part. You only need those triangles. Don't drag in the JSON. You just drag in the clip, the triangle clip. That's your idle. See, and because we named them in, or Mixamo named them, they have good names. Very organized. Shooting, jogging, idle. Just drag them in like you did before, and then we'll eventually do the things you'll do. Everything else later on will be just like in the with the Kenny character, so you don't have to, after this part you're there. Just arranging them a bit so you can see. We had shooting at the top. You come into from entry into an idle state, saving religiously to kind of make sure you don't lose anything. So this is a good setup so far. Going to go to the wanting to start to look. Now I've selected the animation. Okay, one important thing with the animation is the animation clips themselves. You also have to, when you drag them in from Mixamo, they're just sort of raw animation clips, and it's very generic. You have to kind of remind Unity to treat those animations as humanoid. Okay, Mixamo does make a humanoid. Somehow that doesn't quite get carried over. Hey, we want to use our avatar. This is just like with the Kenny part that we see in our course. And you want to apply the humanoid animation sort of parameters. And you have to do that obviously for each one. Now when you click back on it, it's so funny. When you click back on animation, you don't see anything. That's the jogging one, obviously. You do that for each of the animations. The shooting one. Here I just show that when you click on it, the last one I'm doing, you've got to go back into rig section when you're editing, pick humanoid, pick the avatar from the, model that we create as the avatar. That's matching in that character folder, that avatar, okay? And then you have to hit apply, running. And then you go back into it. It's so funny. You have to kind of click back on the animation, and only when you click back on the animation does it sort of update or refresh. When you stay in that setting on the inspector, it doesn't update or it doesn't refresh. You kind of have to click out of it, back into your project folder, click on the animation. Okay. Now it's really important here. I'm going to demonstrate. We're still focused actually in the inspector on the animation clip in the project folder. We're not. You're clicking on your animations in the controller and nothing's really updating or happening or playing. And I just want to emphasize that, this is still our focus, is the clip that's down in the project. Okay, that's why we can see it. Where focus is not, you have to click back on your avatar, okay? And by clicking on the avatar, you're now going into, and the problem is they all look the same. I mean, so now the focus is actually the animator controller from the avatar, okay? And now when you go down to the animation window, your animations are, from the controller. So we have the shooting, idle, and jogging. You should see them in the list when you do the pull down. Now you click on them, it doesn't really do anything. It's The animation window is for the whole controller, and the only way to sort of see those individual animations is to do the drop down. If you've dragged all the animations into your animator controller, they will appear there, and you can preview in the game window and in the scene window. And that's idle. It doesn't look like it's doing much. He's breathing a little bit. Um, and then you'll pick the running, or now even clicking there like that doesn't do anything. You have to kind of really pick it from the down here in the list, okay? And it knows to pull the jogging clip. Okay, I picked jogging, okay, and now when I play it, just to preview it, this is exactly what we see in our course. You're now able to preview. It's pulling from that jogging clip up above in the animator controller, even though it's not really selected, okay? So, probably if you double clicked on jogging up in that animator controller, maybe that would work, but um, you have to just understand the way Unity is kind of, this animation window dope sheet, okay? It's a list, it's got them all listed from the animator controller, and by clicking on preview, you can kind of preview in the game space or scene view what they look like, okay? And yeah, that's just an important consideration. Just want to mention too, you see the overlap with the nav mesh surface on the feet, and that's why it's great to have. You obviously know, we'll see that later in the course, that you can adjust the height of your model placeholder, okay, but sometimes having a character with thicker feet helps. Save all your work, um, because sometimes the surface is not uniform. So yeah, just have thick feet, you'll know why. I'll explain later.